I found out my girlfriend has been selling our intimate videos online without my consent, and now she's telling everyone I forced her into it. My name is Jack, 28M, and for the past 3 years, I've been in what I thought was a committed relationship with Emily, 26F. We met through mutual friends, hit it off immediately, and soon became inseparable. Emily was everything I'd been looking for: funny, smart, and the kind of person who just made life feel lighter. Also, I thought. Now I'm sitting here in absolute shock, questioning everything I believed about her, and trying to process the betrayal I never saw coming. It all started a couple of weeks ago when a random message popped up on my social media. I barely recognized the name, but curiosity got the best of me, so I opened it. It was a screenshot, one that I had to look at several times to understand. There it was, my girlfriend Emily, in a very private, intimate video of us that I remembered all too well. Except this time, it wasn't on her phone. It was on a website I'd never heard of, with her profile name plastered across the top. My mind froze as I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. At first, I thought it had to be a prank. Emily and I had joked about stupid stuff before, but this was something else entirely. I scrolled down, horrified to see several more videos, each more explicit than the last. I felt my stomach churn, a mix of betrayal and humiliation surging through me. How could she do this without my consent? How could she think I wouldn't find out? My hands were shaking as I texted her, asking if we could talk. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my mind was racing. Did she need money that badly? Or was there something else, some darker side to her that I had been oblivious to? Emily responded almost immediately, saying she was on her way home and that she'd be there in a few minutes. I paced the living room, trying to calm down, trying to figure out how to even begin this conversation. When she walked in, I barely gave her time to take off her coat before I showed her the screenshots. She looked at the images, her face unreadable, and then slowly sat down on the couch, sighing deeply. I waited, expecting some kind of apology, maybe an explanation. But instead, she started to laugh, this cold, unsettling chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Oh, come on, Jack," she said, rolling her eyes. "You act like this is some huge betrayal. It's just business." Her words hit me like a slap. Just business? Our private moments were out there for anyone to see, and she was brushing it off as if she'd been caught selling bootleg DVDs. I asked her how long she'd been doing this, and she casually admitted that it had been going on for months. She told me that it was easy money, that people paid well for this kind of content, and that it wasn't hurting anyone. The anger bubbled up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm, to try and understand. I asked her why she hadn't told me, why she had done it behind my back. Her response? "Because you would have been too uptight about it." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat filled with rage and disbelief. I told her that this was a massive violation of trust, that she had no right to put me on display like that without my consent. She just shrugged, clearly unfazed, and that's when I lost it. I told her I wanted her out of the apartment, that I couldn't be with someone who would betray me like this. But that's when she turned it around. She suddenly switched gears, tears welling up in her eyes as she started to spin a story that made me question my own sanity. She told me that she had no choice, that I'd pressured her into doing it, that it was all my idea in the first place. My jaw dropped as she began painting me as some kind of monster, saying I'd forced her into selling our videos, that she'd been reluctant but felt she had no other choice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily was rewriting history right in front of me, twisting the situation to make herself the victim. She started sobbing, putting on this whole performance, claiming that she was just trying to make me happy, that she'd felt compelled to keep up with my supposed demands. The more she talked, the angrier I got. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to gaslight me into believing that I was the one at fault. I stood there stunned as she picked up her phone and started calling mutual friends, spinning the same story to them. I could hear her sobbing into the phone, telling them that I'd forced her into something she'd never wanted to do, that I'd pushed her to sell herself online. My phone began buzzing with messages from people asking if it was true, if I'd really done what she was accusing me of. I felt trapped, cornered by her lies and helpless as she crafted this narrative to ruin me. She turned what should have been a confession into an attack, a calculated move to make sure she came out looking like the victim. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see the damage she was doing. But instead, I found myself frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of her betrayal and the twisted story she was weaving. By the time she finished her calls, she looked at me, a sly smile on her face. "Looks like everyone's on my side now," she sneered. I knew then that this was only the beginning. She was willing to tear down my entire life just to save herself, and I was left wondering how far she'd go to cover her tracks. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but one thing was clear. Emily was a stranger to me, someone I never truly knew. And now, as her web of lies closed in, I realized I was about to fight a battle I never saw coming. The aftermath of Emily's lies spread like wildfire. Within hours, I was getting bombarded with calls and texts from friends, family, and even a couple of acquaintances who'd heard about what happened. I tried explaining my side, but every time I attempted to tell the truth, I was met with skepticism, sometimes even outright disbelief. Emily had gotten ahead of the narrative, and she'd woven her version of events so well that people were taking her word as gospel. It was exhausting. Every call was an uphill battle, with me trying to convince people that I wasn't the villain she'd made me out to be. The more I defended myself, the more desperate I sounded, and I could almost hear the doubt creeping into their voices. It felt like quicksand. No matter what I said, the more I struggled, the deeper I sank. The worst part was hearing from people I trusted, people I thought knew me. My friend Jason, 29M, called, and I could sense the hesitation in his voice. He'd always been the first person I'd go to when things got tough, but now even he sounded uncertain. "Jack, man, I just don't know what to believe," he said, his voice heavy with hesitation. "Emily's been saying some pretty intense stuff. I mean, selling videos of her without her consent. That's a serious accusation." I tried to explain, to tell him that it was all a lie, that Emily had been doing it behind my back. But I could tell he wasn't fully convinced. He ended the call with a half-hearted, "I hope you can figure this out," leaving me feeling more alone than ever. Desperate, I decided to confront Emily again. I needed answers, and I needed to understand why she was so intent on ruining me. I showed up at her apartment unannounced, pounding on the door until she finally opened it, looking irritated but not at all surprised to see me. "Jack, what are you doing here?" she asked, her tone cold and indifferent, as if I were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "I want answers, Emily," I demanded, pushing past her into the apartment. "Why are you doing this? Why are you lying to everyone and turning them against me?" She crossed her arms, leaning against the door with a smirk on her face. "I told you already, Jack. This is all your fault. You're the one who made me feel like I had no choice." The nerve of her, standing there, still pushing the same lies, still acting like she was the victim. I felt a surge of anger, my fists clenching as I tried to keep my composure. "You know that's not true. You know damn well I never asked for this. I didn't even know about it until that screenshot showed up." She rolled her eyes, clearly unfazed. "You really think people are going to believe you over me? I've already told everyone what you did. They've all seen how controlling you were, how you pressured me. You're just making yourself look more pathetic by trying to fight this." Her words cut deep, each one a calculated barb designed to tear me down. I realized then that this wasn't just about protecting herself. She was enjoying this, relishing the power she had over me. She turned my life upside down, and now she was savoring every moment of my misery. But I wasn't about to back down. I needed evidence, something that would expose her lies and prove my innocence. I told her I was going to find a way to clear my name, that I wouldn't stop until the truth came out. She just laughed, that same cold, mocking laugh, and shook her head. "Good luck with that," she sneered. "Even if you find something, nobody's going to believe you. You've already been branded as the bad guy. Might as well get used to it." With that, she slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing in the hallway, seething with anger and frustration. I knew then that I had no choice but to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, no matter how difficult it would be. I wasn't going to let her destroy my life without a fight. Determined to find proof, I started by looking through our shared digital history. I combed through old text messages, emails, anything that might show her deception. It was tedious work, but I couldn't afford to leave any stone unturned. After hours of searching, I found something: a series of emails between her and another user. They were discussing pricing, content, and even the possibility of selling more explicit videos. She'd been negotiating, laying out her terms, all while pretending to be innocent. I took screenshots of everything, saving each piece of evidence in a folder. I felt a small sense of victory, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around. But I knew this was only the beginning. Emily wasn't going to go down easily, and I had no idea what lengths she'd go to in order to keep her secret life hidden. Armed with this new evidence, I started reaching out to our mutual friends again, hoping they'd be willing to listen. I sent them the screenshots, explaining everything, hoping they'd finally see the truth. Some of them responded with shock, while others were hesitant, still unsure of what to believe. It was frustrating, trying to convince them, knowing that Emily's lies had taken root so deeply in their minds. Just as I was beginning to feel like I might be making progress, Emily struck back. She went on social media, posting a long emotional rant about how I was harassing her, spreading lies, and trying to ruin her life. She framed it as a desperate attempt to cling to a relationship that she had supposedly ended months ago, painting me as an obsessive ex who couldn't let go. Her followers rallied behind her, leaving comments of support, calling me every name in the book. I was losing ground faster than I could reclaim it, and I realized that this fight was far from over. Emily was playing a dangerous game, and if I wanted to survive it, I'd have to be smarter, more ruthless than I ever thought possible. The tide was turning, and I could feel myself slipping further into Emily's carefully constructed trap. Every day the whispers grew louder, the accusations fiercer. Friends I'd known for years avoided me in public, refusing to make eye contact or respond to my messages. Even colleagues at work started giving me strange looks, their usual casual greetings replaced by cold silence. Emily's lies had spread like wildfire, and I was the one left standing in the ashes, wondering how it had come to this. But I wasn't about to let her win. I'd already found some evidence, enough to prove she was lying about the videos, but it wasn't enough to clear my name in the eyes of everyone else. I needed something irrefutable, something so damning that even Emily couldn't deny it. I started digging deeper, trying to trace the transactions and activity on her OnlyFans account. It wasn't easy. She had the account under a pseudonym, which made tracking things down a lot harder. But eventually, with a bit of luck and some late-night internet sleuthing, I found another crucial piece of evidence: her account's bank statements. I hadn't even realized we still shared an old, unused account together, but apparently, Emily had been routing some of her profits into that account. She must have forgotten it existed, or maybe she thought I'd never notice. Either way, there it was, clear as day, thousands of dollars in deposits, labeled as of transfers. I printed out the statements, highlighting each transaction. I felt a surge of vindication as I held the evidence in my hands, knowing this could finally expose her lies. But I knew I couldn't confront her just yet. Emily was a master manipulator, and if I wanted to catch her off guard, I'd need to be strategic. The next day, I decided to pay a visit to her friend, Marissa, 27F, who had been one of the loudest voices rallying behind Emily's accusations. Marissa had known us both for years, and while we were never particularly close, I figured if anyone could help me put a stop to this, it would be someone in Emily's inner circle. When I arrived at Marissa's apartment, she looked surprised to see me but reluctantly let me in. I could tell she was on edge, probably expecting a confrontation, but I kept my tone calm, hoping to appeal to whatever sliver of doubt she might have left. "Look, Marissa, I know Emily's been telling you things about me," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I need you to hear me out. I have proof that she's lying." She crossed her arms, her face skeptical. "Emily told me you'd say that. She said you tried to make yourself look like the victim. You know, Jack, it's kind of pathetic." I took a deep breath, feeling my frustration simmer beneath the surface. "Marissa, I have bank statements showing deposits from her OnlyFans account. I have emails where she's negotiating prices for videos. She's been lying to everyone, including you." I handed her a folder with the evidence, watching as she reluctantly took it, flipping through the pages with a frown. I could see the gears turning in her head, the doubt beginning to creep in. She looked back up at me, her expression conflicted. "Okay, so maybe she's been hiding some things," she admitted, her tone cautious. "But that doesn't mean you're innocent either, Jack. I don't know what to believe anymore." I felt a pang of frustration, knowing that even with proof, I still couldn't completely undo the damage Emily had done. But I pressed on, hoping to at least plant a seed of doubt. "She's trying to ruin my life, Marissa. I get it, I made mistakes, but this is beyond anything I ever could have imagined. She's blaming me for her choices, for things I didn't even know she was doing. I need you to see that." Marissa sighed, setting the folder aside. "I'll think about it, okay? But I'm not promising anything. Emily's my friend, and I owe her that much." I left feeling only slightly better, knowing that while I might have gotten through to Marissa, it wasn't nearly enough. Emily's lies had woven a complex web, one that I was struggling to untangle. And with each passing day, I was losing more ground, watching as the people I cared about slowly slipped away. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a message from Emily that night. It was short, cold, and unmistakably a threat. "You need to back off, Jack. I know what you're trying to do, and it won't work. I'll make sure everyone knows just how controlling you are. People believe me now, and I can make your life a living hell." I stared at the message, my hands shaking with anger. She was doubling down, escalating her lies to new levels. She wanted to break me, to push me to the edge, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd succeed. But then I remembered the evidence I'd gathered, the truth I'd uncovered, and I knew I couldn't give up. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about standing up for myself, about fighting back against the woman who had tried to destroy me. She dragged me through the mud, but I wasn't about to let her win. I spent the next few days meticulously documenting everything. I took screenshots of her threats, compiled the evidence I'd gathered, and prepared to make my case public. If she wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. I'd been playing defense for too long, and now it was time to take control. But as I prepared to go public, I received another bombshell, a message from an anonymous account with a link. Against my better judgment, I clicked it, only to find a series of videos Emily had uploaded, far more explicit than anything I'd expected. But the most shocking part, they weren't just of her. She'd filmed some of our most intimate moments without my knowledge and sold them online, claiming it was all with my consent. My stomach dropped, a mixture of horror and betrayal washing over me. This was worse than I'd imagined. She'd violated every shred of trust I'd ever had in her, using me as a pawn in her twisted game. And now the only question that remained was how far I was willing to go to take her down. The shock of discovering the videos hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd thought I'd seen the worst of Emily's betrayal, but this was on a level I could never have anticipated. I sat there, staring at my screen, the horrifying realization settling over me that she'd secretly filmed me and sold those moments to strangers without my knowledge or consent. She'd taken the most private parts of our relationship and twisted them into a sick commodity. I felt violated, exposed, and utterly helpless. It took me a moment to gather myself, my hands trembling as I clicked through the video descriptions. They were filled with lurid details, enticing potential buyers with captions that made it seem as though I was a willing participant. I felt sick to my stomach, my mind reeling with disbelief. This was beyond anything I'd ever imagined her capable of. She hadn't just sold her own body, she'd sold me too, reducing our intimacy to a transaction, a means of making quick cash. Rage boiled within me, hot and blinding. I knew that going public with what I had wouldn't just ruin Emily, it would expose me too. And yet I couldn't let her get away with it. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about reclaiming some sense of control over my life. I had to find a way to turn the tables on her, to make her answer for what she'd done. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think rationally. If I rushed into this, I risked making a mistake, and Emily was the type to exploit any weakness. I needed to be meticulous, to make sure that when I confronted her, I had everything I needed to ensure she couldn't wriggle her way out. My first step was to gather proof that I hadn't consented to the videos. I went through old texts and messages, looking for anything that might show my obliviousness. I found exchanges where I'd clearly stated that I wasn't comfortable with her filming our intimate moments, times where she'd reassured me she understood my boundaries. She blatantly disregarded them, all while pretending to respect my wishes. I saved each message, building a case that could expose her lies. Next, I needed witnesses. I reached out to a few close friends, including Marissa, and showed them the videos Emily had posted, omitting as much detail as I could to avoid any further humiliation. They were horrified, the shock evident on their faces as they realized the extent of Emily's betrayal. Seeing their reactions gave me a small sense of validation, a reminder that I wasn't the crazy one, no matter how much Emily tried to paint me as such. Marissa, visibly shaken, offered to speak up on my behalf. I had no idea she'd do something like this, Jack. I believed her lies because, well, she's good at manipulation. But this is unforgivable. Whatever you need, I'm here to help. With their support, I felt stronger, emboldened by the knowledge that I wasn't alone in this fight. I knew that going public would be messy, that it would bring unwanted attention, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to clear my name. Emily had taken everything from me, and now it was time to make her face the consequences. I decided to confront her directly, hoping to catch her off guard. I knew she thrived on control, on twisting the narrative to suit her needs, but this time I was the one holding the cards. I texted her, asking her to meet me at a cafe we used to frequent, hoping the familiarity of the location would make her feel comfortable, unsuspecting. When she arrived, she wore her usual mask of calm confidence, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took a seat across from me. I could tell she was wary, sensing that something was different. I wasted no time, pulling out my phone and showing her the bank statements, the texts, and finally, the videos. Her face went pale, her eyes widening as she realized the extent of what I knew. What are you doing, Jack?" she stammered, a flicker of fear crossing her features. "You can't just—" "I know everything, Emily," I interrupted, my voice cold and steady. "I know about the OnlyFans, the videos, the lies you've been telling our friends. I have evidence, and I'm done playing your games. You've manipulated everyone around you, and now it's over." She recovered quickly, a sneer forming on her lips as she leaned back, crossing her arms defiantly. "So what? You think anyone's going to believe you? You're just a bitter ex trying to make me look bad. No one's going to care, Jack. You'll only make yourself look pathetic." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze with a steely resolve. "I have messages from our friends, Marissa included, who know exactly what you've done. I have records, Emily, proof that you sold our private moments without my consent. Do you really think you can bluff your way out of this?" For a moment, I saw the facade crack, a flash of panic in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to be prepared, to have gathered the support of people she thought she'd already turned against me. But then her expression shifted, a twisted smile forming on her lips. "Fine," she said, her tone icy. "Go ahead, expose me. But remember, if you go through with this, I'll make sure everyone knows your little secrets too. I'll tell them you knew, that you were in on it, that you were the one pushing me into it. You think anyone will believe your side after that? You'll be just as ruined as I am." I felt a chill run down my spine, realizing just how far she was willing to go to protect herself. But I'd come too far to back down now. She could try to spin her lies, to twist the story, but I wasn't about to let her intimidate me. "Do your worst, Emily," I said, standing up, my voice steady. "Because I'm done letting you control my life. If you want to drag me through the mud, then go ahead. But I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done." I left the cafe, my heart pounding, knowing that a storm was coming. Emily would retaliate and things would get ugly, but I was ready. I'd spent too long living in fear, in the shadow of her lies, and now I was finally free. Whatever came next, I knew I could face it, because the truth was on my side. After our confrontation, I braced myself for the inevitable fallout. Emily had threatened to drag me down with her, and I knew she wouldn't back down without a fight. The very next day, she began posting cryptic messages on social media, carefully crafted to paint herself as the victim. She implied that I had been abusive, that I'd driven her to her actions, twisting the story in a way that only she could. I could see the game she was playing, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of our friends, setting up her defense before I had the chance to make my move. It was painful to watch as some of my friends reached out to express their concern, asking if I was okay, if I'd really done the things she claimed. Her manipulation was thorough, and despite my best efforts, I could see that some people had already been swayed by her side of the story. She was turning the tables, portraying herself as a woman who had been wronged, forced into actions she never wanted by a controlling, possessive boyfriend. The messages she posted were vague, but suggestive enough to make me look like the monster in her twisted version of events. I tried to focus on the evidence I'd gathered, the messages, the receipts, the undeniable proof of her actions. I knew I couldn't let her win. I had to stand up for myself, to show the truth, no matter how painful it would be to bring it all to light. I began by contacting a close friend who had experience with public relations, explaining the situation in its entirety. He agreed to help me strategize, advising me to release my evidence in a way that would leave no room for doubt, making it clear that Emily's version of the story was nothing but a web of lies. Together, we planned a public statement, something simple and direct that included screenshots of her messages, the bank transfers, the messages between her and her fans, all of it. I knew it would be messy, that I'd be exposing a deeply private part of my life, but Emily had left me no choice. She had gone too far, and I couldn't afford to let her narrative go unchecked. It was time for everyone to see her for who she truly was. The morning I posted the evidence, I felt a strange sense of calm. I'd been terrified of this moment, of the backlash and judgment, but as I hit send, a weight lifted from my shoulders. There was no turning back now, but I knew that I'd done everything I could to protect myself, to show the truth in a way that would speak for itself. Within minutes, the post began to gain traction, people sharing it, commenting, expressing their shock of what they were seeing. Friends who had been silent reached out, apologizing for believing her lies, for doubting me even for a moment. But Emily, of course, wasn't done. She fired back with a vengeance, posting a video tearfully claiming that I'd manipulated her into making the videos, that I was the one who had encouraged her to sell our private moments to strangers. She put on a show, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling as she spun her narrative into something dark and twisted, desperate to salvage her image. I watched, numb, as she painted herself as the victim once again, dragging me through the mud with her lies. In the days that followed, the battle escalated. She filed a restraining order against me, claiming that I had harassed her, that I'd threatened her after she'd broken off our relationship. She even managed to convince a few of her friends to back up her story, their statements filled with half-truths and outright fabrications. It was a nightmare, a spiral of accusations and counter-accusations that seemed endless, each one more vicious than the last. I was exhausted, my life turned upside down, but I refused to give up. I had already lost so much because of her, and I wasn't about to let her take anything more from me. With the help of my PR friend, I continued to release evidence, exposing the lies she was spreading, showing the contradictions in her statements. I could see her grip on our friends loosening, the support she had slowly dwindling as people began to see the truth. They were beginning to realize that her victim act was nothing more than a charade, a desperate attempt to shift the blame. Then, one evening, I received a message from someone I didn't recognize. It was a man who had been one of Emily's subscribers, someone who had paid for the videos and photos she'd sold online. He apologized, explaining that he hadn't known the full story, that he'd been duped by her into believing it was all consensual. He offered to come forward to share his experience, revealing that she had bragged about the money she was making off of my ignorance, laughing about how I had no idea what was going on. With his testimony, everything changed. I brought it to my lawyer, who advised me to take legal action. We filed a lawsuit against Emily, not just for the unauthorized videos, but for the defamation she'd spread, the damage she'd caused to my reputation. Her lies had gone too far, and now I had the support of someone who had been directly involved in her scheme, someone who could expose her for the fraud she was. In court, she tried to put on the same show, feigning innocence, turning on the tears as she spun her tale of manipulation and coercion. But the evidence was overwhelming. My lawyer laid out everything: the messages, the payments, the testimony from her own subscriber, detailing her deception in painstaking detail. I watched as her composure cracked, the confidence she had in her lies faltering under the weight of the truth. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering her to pay damages for the emotional and reputational harm she had caused. It wasn't enough to erase what she'd done, but it was a victory, a small piece of justice in a situation that had turned my life upside down. Emily left the courtroom in silence, her head down, the consequences of her actions finally catching up to her. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my life, to pick up the pieces and move forward. Friends who had distanced themselves reached out, apologizing for believing her lies, offering their support as I worked to move past the nightmare she had created. It wasn't easy. There were still moments where the memories haunted me, where the weight of her betrayal lingered like a shadow. But I knew that I'd fought for my truth, that I had stood up for myself in the face of her cruelty. As for Emily, I heard rumors that she had tried to start fresh, to move on to a new city where no one knew her story. But her past had a way of following her, the truth of what she'd done becoming a stain she couldn't wash away. I didn't care where she ended up, as long as she was far from me, her lies no longer able to reach me. I had finally broken free from her grasp, and for the first time I felt a sense of peace, a freedom that had been long overdue.